Folks, I just want to share a short passage from the Bible with you, just a story that we'll all kind of talk about, something to remind us about what's important in life before we pray tonight and go our separate ways. Something that God really put on my heart as well, because I realize a lot of times we fill up our lives with things that are meaningless, with things that we value, but God sees as garbage, you know? And I'm going to open up to Luke chapter 16. This is verse 19. Luke chapter 16, verse 19. And I'm going to read a story for you. And we'll all kind of get into it and see what the Lord has for us today. There was a rich man who was clothed in purple and fine linen, and who feasted sumptuously every day. And at his gate was laid a poor man named Lazarus, covered with sores, who desired to be fed with what fell from the rich man's table. Moreover, even the dogs came and licked his sores. The poor man died and was carried by the angels to Abraham's side. The rich man also died and was buried. And in Hades, being in torment, he lifted up his eyes and saw Abraham far off and Lazarus at his side. And he called out, "Father Abraham, have mercy on me and send Lazarus to dip the end of his finger in water and cool my tongue, for I am in anguish in this flame." But Abraham said, "Child, remember that you in your lifetime received your good things, and Lazarus in like manner bad things. But now he is comforted here, and you are in anguish. And besides all this, between us and you, a great chasm has been fixed, in order that those who would pass from here to you may not be able, and none may cross from there to us." And he said, "Then I beg you, Father, to send him to my father's house. For I have 5 brothers, so that he may warn them, lest they also come into this place of torment." But Abraham said, "They have Moses and the prophets. Let them hear them." And he said, "No, Father Abraham, but if someone goes to them from the dead, they will repent." And he said to him, "If they do not hear Moses and the prophets, neither will they be convinced if someone should rise from the dead." My intent today is not to speak on hell or the eternal flames of the lake of fire. But I do want to speak today about that first verse, about the rich man. 19 words written about the life of a man that may have lived 60, 70, 80 years. And all that's left of him is 19 words. And none of them are very, very flattering. They say, George W. Truett, he was a well-known preacher from Texas. He once came to the house of a well-known oil man, and after having some dinner there, the oil man took him out to the back porch, and he said, "Hey, why don't you look around?" And as he looked out, he saw the Texas desert, the landscape, and he said, "You see all those oil wells over there to the west?" He says, "Those are my oil wells. And then you see the ones to the east, or in Texas, them be mine as well, y'all." Right? And he's showing him all these oil wells that he could see barely off into the distance. You know, he says, "Oh, that's all my property." And Truett just kind of looks at him and says, "Oh, that's quite a lot." And then he says, "Well, sir, how much do you own that way?" Pointing up. It's an old story, but it bears true again and again. We like our stuff here. We fill up our lives with things here, and yet our lives are so empty. And that's what I want to speak about, empty lives. But back to the story. You know, this story I do believe is true. Unlike some of other Christ's parables that were just stories, I think this is a true story, because Jesus calls out the poor man and says Lazarus. He actually has a name. And this is almost from the side, it's better than reality TV today. And we see this rich man. This rich man, and it says 3 things about him. He was rich, he wore purple and fine linen, and he ate sumptuously. He was rich, meaning he had an estate, he had money, he was high up in the Jewish politics there. He wore purple and he had fine linen, which means during the day he was in the aristocracy. So maybe even Jesus was mentioning Herod, who was the king of that day. It was somebody who was a prince, possibly. And fine linen means he just had a really fancy pair of boxers, because linen was worn at night. So that's all that means. But he was somebody who had money. And then it says, and who feasted sumptuously every day. You know, this was like a cross between Cake Boss and Hell's Kitchen. You guys know? So this was really good food that he had. But that's it. Then the verse stops. There's nothing more about the rich man. And I read this and I think, wow, what if this is the way I'm remembered? Yeah, Pete Kachuk, he had some cash, he had dough, right? He hustled, and then he wore nice clothes because, you know, American Express, or not American Express, Express, you know, he shopped a lot, you know, he looked nice, and, you know, he ate well. Like, that guy could, you know, put down a steak like nobody else, you know? And that's all they knew about it. That was on my gravestone. You know, this guy looked nice, dressed well, had money, and ate a lot. And that's it. That's like the whole life. That's what I'm going to be remembered for. It's so tragic, right? Lazarus. We read about him. You know, it doesn't give us a backstory here. I don't know who this man was earlier. You know, I'd like to think maybe he was, at some point as a younger man, he had dreams and ambitions. He, you know, worked hard. A man who studied the Word of God. A man who lived in hope, and for some reason, this sickness befell him. The sickness befell him where he could not walk by himself. He had to be carried. And so, like they, you know, in those days, they put the sick people, the lame people out in a well-trafficked area where there were a lot of rich people. It's the same, you know, today in the sense that I used to live in Baltimore in the financial district downtown, and every time I drove in, it was like 4 stoplights to the high-rise where I was at, and every stoplight you had 5 or 6 homeless guys just hustling you. You know, and all of them had, you know, it was like 4 different methods. One was like the Christian guy, had God bless you. The other guy was like the funny guy, you know, need money for alcohol research. The third guy had his own deal, and then there was the guy that was like without missing an arm or a leg, you know? So it was like they're always hustling you for money because they know that's where all the people that have the money. So they took Lazarus, who was this man who could not walk, who had these boils on his body, and they put him by the entrance of this rich man's house because they knew there was a lot of traffic in and out for whatever business, for maybe the rich man himself, and that is how he would maybe earn a little bit of a living, where somebody would finally look down upon him and say, oh, I pity you, here's a denarius, you know, or some other coin. And that is how he was. He laid there and he wished he could have some of those crumbs that fell off that table. You know, maybe he looked inside into the the way the houses were built there, you could practically see inside the house if you were looking through the gate, and he could see the what was called the triclinium in Latin, which was their dining room, where these men relaxed, and as they ate on these couches, and the crumbs would fall off, and they would take this food and throw it to the dogs that were there, and he would look at that and say, wow, I wish I could have a little bit of that. But he never got any of that, is what is implied in this text. And in fact, he never got any kindness from this man, because it says these dogs would come and lick his wounds. You know, as he lay there with these boils on his skin, the wind and the dry air and the sun would beat on him, and these boils would pop, and blood would come out of these boils and these cracks in his cracked skin, and the dogs would come and lick this blood off of him. And it's implied in here that the dogs were kinder to Lazarus than the rich man. They would come and lick this blood off of him and clean him up, and they were kinder to him than the rich man. They both died, we read. The rich man also died and was buried. We read the poor man died and was carried up by angels to Abraham's side. They both died, and they went to 2 different places. And now I have to note here, The rich man did not go to hell or to Hades, as it is written here, because he was rich. And the poor man did not go to Abraham's side because he was poor. If you're really poor, that doesn't mean you automatically go to heaven. I live in a trailer park. Yes. Not going to happen. Same as if you're really rich. It's not like, oh my goodness, burning in the lake of fire forever. I like my money. No, that's not how it works. Even though Jesus did say it is difficult for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven, but then he said nothing is impossible for God. God saves both people and he uses both for his purposes. But the difference was one man lived for himself and the other man lived in hope. One man lived completely wrapped up in who he was and this life that he had constructed for himself, while the other man lived and hoped for a better future, knowing that this was nothing that he was living in, that it was a temporary life, that he was just a journeyman on this world. He was hoping for something better. I want to read to you from John chapter 10, verse 10. Just a short statement that Jesus said. John 10:10. Jesus says, I came that they might have a life and have it abundantly. Jesus says, I came that they may have a life. He came from heaven. He left everything. He came down here and he says, I've come here for a purpose, and that is to give you life. And not just, I'll raise you up, you guys will be feeble. No, he said life in abundance. Now, there's a way to interpret this verse. If you're very charismatic and you're going to say, yeah, you're going to have a lot of money, you're going to be health, wealth, and prosperity, there's a way to interpret it this way, but I think God is saying something else here. And what God is saying is, don't live an empty life. Don't live an empty life. An empty life begins with an empty salvation. And an empty salvation begins with cheap grace, as spoken by Bonhoeffer, who was a very good theologian. In the 1940s, Bonhoeffer wrote this. He said, cheap grace is the preaching of forgiveness without requiring repentance. Baptism without church discipline. Communion without confession. Cheap grace is grace without discipleship, grace without the cross, grace without Jesus Christ. And finally, he said, cheap grace is no bargain. And he would know. He paid for it with his life when the Nazis killed him for preaching out against the atrocities that were committed during World War II. But cheap grace we look at it and we think we're getting a deal. It's like, really? I could be a Christian, come to church, look at all the people, especially in Russian churches. You come in, my American friend always comments on the fact that Sunday morning as you're driving through Sacramento, you see all these beautiful Russian women going to church. I want to come to your church. Like, bro, wrong reason. But cheap grace. When was the last time we confessed? When was the last time we disciplined ourselves? When was the last time we committed ourselves to discipleship? Because if that's not a commitment we've made, then perhaps we're living under cheap grace. We're taking the grace that God's given us and abusing it. A dad was trying to explain this to his 8-year-old son. And he's explaining, mercy and grace, and the kid's just like drawing a blank. Like, mercy, what is this theological concept? Grace. And finally it clicks. He's like, Dad, I think I know what you mean. Let me show you. And he goes and gets a Calvin and Hobbes comic book. You guys know Calvin and Hobbes? Show of hands. All right. Everybody else was born in Russia. Okay. But nothing against you guys. Calvin and Hobbes, it's this little kid and his pet tiger, and they have all these things, their adventures together. But in this comic strip, Calvin runs up to Hobbes and says, hey, look at this. Dad gave me his binoculars, his cheap binoculars. And he said, well, what happened? He said, well, I broke his old ones. And he said, well, might as well just start breaking your own now. So he bought me my own pair of cheap binoculars. And Hobbes says, all right, let's take these down to the beach to look at babes, you know. And Calvin says, well, they're not strong enough. And then he thinks for a little bit and says, well, why don't I go break his expensive binoculars so that he can give me a pair of those? And that's what grace is about. Cheap grace is about when we take this gift that's God given us and we say, all right, I could do whatever you want, like we read in Romans, and because the more sin abounds, the more grace abounds, and we say, well, I'm going to take this grace and I'm going to go sin more. And Apostle Paul says, no, that's not the way it works. That's not the way it works. Yet that's what we do in our life in cheap grace and empty salvation. And an empty salvation leads to an absent relationship. I want to read to you a verse from Jeremiah. Very, very powerful words from God to his own people. And he says to them, for my people have done two evil things. He calls them out. He says, for they have done two evil things. They have abandoned me, the fountain of living water. Evil thing number one. And two, and they have dug for themselves cracked cisterns that can hold no water at all. Can you imagine that? In our churches, you're going to see some people, you know, and the first person I think about is Francis Chan. I heard him today, and a man that's just, he's there. He's at that fountain of living water. He's drinking from it. It's coming out of him. I mean, he's spreading it around. You can see that man just, he's there. He's at that fountain every day, coming back to the fountain of living water. And then you have people that have dug themselves cisterns, which are basically big, they were holes in the ground, or you could also have them above ground. It was basically like a water tower. And what they do is they say, well, the fountain of living water is over there. It's on the straight and narrow path. I've got to walk up this mountain and go, you know, uphill both ways to get to that living water because, you know, following Jesus, it takes discipline. But what I'm going to do, I've got an idea, Jesus. I'm going to take some of your water and I'm going to bring it home and I'm going to put it in this cistern, into this water tank I've got, and I'm going to carry it around with me. It's going to be my water. I'm going to do what I want with this living water. And yet he says those are cracked cisterns. There are people out there that take a little bit of the Word of God, just enough to play that shell, enough to when somebody asks them, like, yeah, you read the Bible today? Yeah, man, this verse about grace, it was really good. Did you read the Bible? Oh, yeah, I read about God. It's in the Bible. You know, I read that book about God. You know, just enough water, they'll take a little bit, and they'll put it in this empty cistern, the cistern that's cracked because you can't hold anything in there. They can retain nothing with an empty salvation, and that is what they live, that shell life. Just enough water there at the bottom that's not leaking out of that crack, and then nothing else. And he said, that's what my people have done. When there is a fountain that's just gushing out of the ground, cool, clear water, I am the fountain, the water of life, and they're taking just a little bit and hiding it away and not living near the fountain. The biggest sign that you today have an empty salvation, that you today lead an absent relationship, is written in 2 Timothy 3:5. 2 Timothy 3:5. They will act religious, but they will reject the power that can make them godly. This is the New Living Translation. It's a little bit clearer, I think, this way. They will act religious, but they will reject the power that could make them godly. You can go to church. You can pray. You can even read. But do you have the power of God in your life today? Do you have the power of God? The one that created the universe, the one that knows you in intimate detail. Do you have that power inside of you today? That's the first sign. You know, my mom always said, you know, sometimes as kids, you know, have you guys prayed before bed? Like, oh yeah, God bless me for that. Yeah, you're done. It's like brushing your teeth, 20-second prayer and done, I'm in bed. And my mom's like, oh man, your prayers haven't even hit the ceiling. There was nothing to them. Don't we often do that sometimes? We ask others to pray for us because we don't even believe in the power of our own prayers. Has that happened to you? We have no desire to speak to others. We haven't felt God's nearness in a while. We don't live in faith. We don't have that power. I had a friend. He went on a trip to Kamchatka with us. Kamchatka's all the way around the world. The ticket there cost $2,500. And I was surprised because he came from a poor background. I said, Paul, how'd you do this? He said, Pete, I knew I had to come this year. I sold my car. It was all he had. He sold his car. He stepped out in faith, and he felt God's power in his life, and God worked through him in a tremendous way. Another girl that went on a missionary trip to us to Russia, I was asking him, how do you get a month and a half off from work? It's pretty incredible. And everyone, somebody got it off, somebody didn't. She said, well, I couldn't. I work in nursing. They just don't have that much vacation time. So I quit my job. I quit my job so that I could go on a missionary trip, so that I could step out in faith and do what God had put in my heart. When was the last time you sacrificed something important for God? When was the last time we stepped out in faith and said, God, you know what? I know I've got a ton of homework here. I know I should be, but I'm going to step out in faith and I'm going to do something radical. I'm going to do something different from what I've always done because I want your power in my life. I want to feel your closeness. I could tell you about my dad today. I could tell you how he looks like. I could show you a picture. I could show you videos. I could give you his number so you can call him up anytime. You can become best friends with him. But at the end of the day, he's not going to be your dad. You can go out and you can meet somebody else and you can say, Pete's dad, oh yeah, he's also my dad. Oh, he's so cool. That guy makes an awesome steak. Super cool guy. Really good at mowing the lawn. You could tell him all these intimate details about my dad. And they might believe you. They're going to say, oh, really? Your name's Kachuk too? Yeah, my name's Kachuk. How'd you know? Because Pete's my dad, right? But at the end of the day, when you come to my house, my dad's going to look at you and be like, what? Who are you? You want me to feed you? You want me to clothe? No, go find, well, he might feed you. He's a nice guy. But, when it comes down to it and he's splitting up the inheritance, you're not getting the car. Let's put it that way, right? Because you're not his son. You're not his daughter. And yet we make the same assumption about God. We say, God, I know enough about you. I can tell other people about how cool you are. I'm going to take some of this living water and put it in my life. And he's like, all right, but who are you again? Why? What makes you think you have any claim on me? There's no relationship. And finally, an empty line, again, begins with an empty salvation. It leads to an absent relationship. And finally, it's filled with things that are harmful or meaningless. If you're not filled with devotion and a passion for God, then the question is, what fills you? It can be two things. It can be sin, and I'm going to read a quick passage here. If you remember in Matthew, we read, when an unclean spirit goes out of a man, he goes through dry places seeking rest and finds none. And then he says, I will return to my house from which I came. And when he comes, he finds it empty and swept and put in order. And then he goes and takes with him 7 other spirits, more wicked than himself, and they enter and dwell there. And the last state of that man is worse than the first. So shall it also be with this wicked generation. He goes out, he was forced out, the house was repoed by Jesus. Jesus came in and said, this man is mine. And the spirit goes out, he's forced out. He goes out there, he hangs out with the other homeless spirit. He's got nowhere to go. He happens to come by around and finds out that there's nobody else living in that house. He comes back in and he brings all the other homeless spirits with him. That's what happens with an empty salvation. Or we can fill it up with our own events. As we grow up, we hear about what life's all about. And Satan's lie is that live a full life. He says, I want to give you a full life as well. Fill it up. You know what? Hit the gym twice a day. Look good. Go to school, work hard, get that 4.0 GPA. Grow up, have fun, hit the clubs. Don't do it too much. You don't want your parents to find out, but just have some fun, meet some people. Go out, meet a pretty girl, meet a good-looking guy. He's funny, he's cute, the whole deal. Get married, have a nice family. Satan wants the best for you. Have a nice house, 2-car garage, pool in the back, jacuzzi later on when you have more money. Send the kids to college. Just live a nice life. There's nothing wrong with that. And it's such a lie. Such a lie. And yet something that we chase. Just imagine right now, you're going to stand before God after living this life, the life of this rich man, and you're going to say, God, I know you told me to go out and get people for your kingdom and live a holy life, but check out how hot my wife is. God's going to say, well, that's fine, but where's the fruit? Or you're going to stand up, my husband is so funny, he's such a catch. Or you're going to say, check out my 2-car garage, God, I even got a jet ski in the back. You're going to say, God, my 4.0 GPA did not come cheap. I had to miss out on a lot of parties, but I got my 4.0. I got my kids through college, God. I've got a lot of friends. I've got 1,500 friends on Facebook, God. That doesn't come easy. And he's going to look at you, and he's going to look at all these worthless accomplishments, and he's going to say, where's the fruit? Where's the holy life? Why is your life so empty? Why has it been so meaningless? All you've got to brag about is a high score on Modern Warfare 4 or whatever is out there right now on Xbox or whatever. Is that all we're going to bring to God? Is that all we really have? I'll remember there's a Mayo commercial, an old mayonnaise commercial. So this guy wakes up at 2 a.m., right? He's hungry. He goes to make himself a sandwich, 3 billion women in the world, and he has to make himself a sandwich. A tragedy. JK. But he goes to make himself a sandwich. He gets up, he gets into the fridge, gets the bread out, gets the ham, gets the turkey, tomatoes, gets some lettuce, everything's going good. And finally, he's like, all right, top it off with some mayo, right? He gets that mayo jar, he opens it up, and it's like, there's no mayo. It's empty. So he puts it back, puts the bread back, puts the tomatoes back, the turkey back, and goes back to sleep. And the announcer says in the end, you know what? A sandwich is just not a sandwich without Kraft mayo. What if we come to God and we stack it up? All the stuff we've got, all the friends we've got, all the relationships we've made and the accomplishments, and God's going to look at you and says, a life is just not a life without me. A life it's Jesus is everything, and without Jesus, everything is nothing. Where's the most important part? And yet all we have to show him is our high scores and number of friends and whatnot. I love Francis Chan. Again, I'll reference him. This is something I saw a while back, but it sticks with me because some of you have you seen Francis Chan on the balance beam? By any chance, anybody? Some of the ladies here. Isn't that just a great illustration? And we should show it to you guys one time, but Francis Chan is on this balance beam, and if you guys know, the girls that do gymnastics, it's just this big hunk of wood, I guess is what it is. I have no clue what it is. It's just this high thing, and you're supposed to jump on it and do all these things. So he's on there, he gets up there, and he says, imagine if you're the gymnast, and you're on there, let's say it goes this way, you're up, 4 feet in the air, and you're supposed to, get yourself ready and prepare yourself, and then you do a bunch of flips on it, right? And then the music starts, you're about to do your thing, and then you get down on it, and you just begin to hug it. You're just hanging on for dear life, and then the music ends, and you just get off, and you're like, all right, where's the applause? And isn't that what we do? When God says, step out in faith, I want you to feel the power, my power in your life. I want you to live a life that is abundant, and yet we're holding on to this balance beam. We're going to play it safe. We're going to have our kids wear helmets, and we're going to wear our seatbelts, and we're going to gather up money for a rainy day. We're not going to sacrifice or pay more than 2 or 5 or 3% into the church because we got to have some saved up for later on, and we're just going to live a safe life where we never step out. We never do anything radical. We never do anything for Jesus, where Jesus would be proud of us, where he would say, yes, you're being persecuted like I was persecuted, because we're staying safe. Both men died, Lazarus and the rich man. They went to 2 different places. I'm not going to go into it too much, but I do want to look at something here. The rich man goes to Hades, and 5 minutes in, he is the most Christian guy you would ever find, right? All of a sudden, he's an evangelist. All of a sudden, he wants to tell people about Jesus, and he calls out and says, hey, go tell my brothers. But what really strikes me here, he says, hey, can Lazarus come down and just get some water and put it on my tongue? I'm not going to go into it any more than that, but I do want to read you a quick excerpt from a diary. I found this many, many years ago, and I've been waiting for an opportunity to share it. I want to share it with you guys. In 1943, there was a B-24 bomber. World War II's going on. They have a raid over Italy, I think. They turn around over the Mediterranean, they get lost, and nobody hears from them ever again. An expedition in 1958 finds them in the middle of the Sahara Desert. They find the bomber, and they find these guys. They find just skeletons, obviously. They died. But what happened was they jumped from the parachute when the plane malfunctioned to save their lives. And they had no water, or very little, which ended quickly. And they found a diary. One of the men was writing his final days down. A short excerpt, and I want to read those to you. But I think you're going to get a little bit of a taste. To me, it sounds like somebody from hell itself is writing down what it feels like to slowly die and want to die, but you can't. Friday 9th, this is Lieutenant Toner writing. He said, Shelley, Rip, and Moore went separately to try to go for help. The rest of us, all very weak, eyes bad, not any travel, all want to die. Still very little water, nights are about 35 degrees, good north wind, no shelter, 1 parachute left. Saturday, April 10, 3 days before they perish. Still having prayer meetings for help. No sign of anything, a couple of birds, good wind from the north. We're really weak now. Can't walk. Pains all over. Still all want to die. Nights very cold. No sleep. Sunday 11. Still waiting for help. Still praying. Eyes bad. Lost all of our weight. Aching all over. Could make it if we had water, just enough left to put our tongues to. Have hope for help very soon. No rest, still same place. Monday, the 12th. No help yet. Very cold night. The entry from Monday 12th was the last one, written in just very thick pencil lines. Later that year, the remains of another airman were found a couple miles away from the crash site. His parachute was still attached. It appeared to have malfunctioned when he jumped. And they write in saying he fell to his death. And they write and say, under the circumstances, he was probably the more fortunate of the crew. Can you imagine that? These men out there in the desert, they want to die. If they only had some water, they've got nothing. Just pain, and nobody to help them. Imagine that man, the rich man, just pain, just wanting some water. Nobody can come help him. The worst part is these men died, but the worst part is he was 2,000 years ago, he was screaming for help, and he's still screaming for help today. and he'll still be screaming for help 2,000 years from now. Because it never ends. Jesus says, I want to give you a life of abundance. And in order to give you a life of abundance, you have to thirst. If you thirst later on, when you're in Hades, that's too late. He says, I want you to thirst now, and I want you to thirst for it as bad as you will later. I want you to desire this fountain of life. I want you to desire righteousness. We read in Matthew chapter 5, thirst and hunger for righteousness. Thirst and hunger for the abundant life that Jesus has to offer. I'm going to end with just one quick story and a passage from Ephesians. This girl named Alessia, this was many years ago, 17 years old in Virginia. She went to the same high school as me, but she was several years ahead of me. 17-year-old girl. It was early in the morning. Our youth was getting together at church. I think it was a Friday morning or a Saturday morning. They were all about to leave. They were getting on the bus to go to a trip to another state for a youth conference. They took roll. She was missing. They couldn't wait. Everybody got on the bus and left. My dad was the youth pastor at that time. 2 hours into the trip, he gets a phone call. And they said, please pray for Alessia's family. She died. She woke up early in the morning. It was maybe 4 or 5 a.m. She was rushing to get to church to make the bus on time, fell asleep behind the wheel, and crashed into a light pole right in front of the high school that she attended and died, literally 5 minutes away from the church. The tragic part is not that she died, and it is tragic as it is. But there was, in all of this, a ray of hope. When we were at her funeral, her teachers from high school came as well. They came and they said something that was more encouraging than probably anything we could read in the Bible, because they said, we want to come and attend and honor this 17-year-old girl and offer a testimony about her. They said, when we teach high school is the breeding place of all that is evil. You get teenagers that are growing up, hormones, everybody's just turning legal, everybody's getting stuff, doing stuff. It's high school, the best years of your life. This is the environment we saw Alessia in, and we saw somebody that was completely different from anything we've seen before. We've seen Russians before. We've seen Christians before. And then there was Alessia. The girl that swam upstream despite everything that was going on. She wouldn't participate in the parties. She would witness openly to the people. She would never cursed. She was always kind, always sacrificial. And we looked at this 17-year-old girl in this high school, and we were shocked because we could not figure out how was she just this pure example of God's life in the midst of all this corruption that is the American high school system today. And we looked at her, and professor after professor, teacher after teacher came up, and they said the same thing about her in gym class, in history class, wherever she was. We were amazed by who this girl was. She was the modern day Daniel, just this light. And each one testified and testified and testified again about the abundant life that Alessia lived. There were a lot more than 19 words said about her, because there was a lot more than 19 words to say about her. Ephesians chapter 3, verse 14. This is a prayer of Paul. Let's just read it all standing up, and then we'll pray ourselves as well. Apostle Paul writes, "For this reason I kneel before the Father, from whom his whole family in heaven and on earth derives its name. I pray that out of his glorious riches he may strengthen you with power through his Spirit in your inner being, so that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith. And I pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power, together with all the saints, to grasp how wide and how long and how high and how deep is the love of Christ, and to know that this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we ask or imagine, according to his power that is at work within us. To him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus through all generations forever and ever. Amen. Let's just bow our hearts and our heads in prayer. Father, I thank you so much for this evening and this opportunity to open your word and just to share with these folks what you've put in my heart, God. But I pray that it not be from me, but that it be from you, God. Because so many of us live a shell game. So many of us carry around that broken cistern with no water in it, and we pretend, and nobody knows but you, God. And today you tell us what the ending will be for folks like that, the folks that live with an empty salvation, that live an empty life. And yet today you also offer your grace and love, your power. And for those of us who are willing to step out in faith, you're willing to give life. You're willing to give life in abundance. God, I just pray that you bless everyone here, just every single soul. Bless the folks that couldn't make it here today as well, God. You bless us all to have the courage to step out. You bless us with your power. You bless us with your love. And you bless us with your abundant life. Be with us all in this week. May your name be praised through our lives, through our abundant lives. Amen.